So first of all, what is AWS? That is Amazon Web Service, which is a platform that offers cloud computing solutions which are flexible. Why we say these are flexible? Because it gives us the option to choose the location where we can deploy our workloads. It gives us option regarding the software and hardware configuration of our virtual servers and many other options related to application deployment, right? And the AWS services are scalable. Scalable means that we can increase the number of resources as per our application requirement anytime, and if we do not require these many resources, then we can also release the resources as per our application requirement, and accordingly will be charged. So easy to use means it provides us a very user friendly interface to access AWS services. Also very cost effective, as users don't need to pay in advance or make long term contracts to create or deploy applications. And it is this AWS cloud is based on pay per use model. That means, as per the usage of services we need to pay. Suppose if Amazon charges $0.023 per GB for storing data and one of its storage services like Amazon S3 for a month, and you are going to store 1000 GB of data in a month, then you will be ending up in paying $23 for that particular month. But let's say next month you need to store only 100 GB of data, so you'll need to pay $2.3 for that month. So you need not buy huge storage infrastructure that remains idle most of the time, because usually we buy huge infrastructure, whether it is related to storage or computation capacity, keeping in mind the peak load. So that remains idle most of the time. Only when peak load is there, only that time the whole infrastructure is utilized. So in case of Amazon infrastructure, you can hire the infrastructure as per your current requirements, and you can increase the resources when your load increases, and you can decrease the resources, you can release the resources as the workload becomes less. And it is also highly available. That means AWS cloud provides you high availability, and normally they guarantee 99.999% of availability of services. That means the maximum downtime in a year can be 5.25 minutes. And basically this availability also depends on the type of service which you are accessing, because there are different SLAs for different types of services. SLA is service level agreement. That is basically quality of service, claims related to quality of service they are offering. So as per the SLA of a given service, the availability is guaranteed, right? Then next is related to security, which is an essential aspect for any organization who is going to deploy its applications on these third party servers, right? So, AWS is very much concerned about the security of the data and applications. AWS guarantees the three major traits of security, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And it also ensures the physical security of data centers, right? Even if the virtual servers which are actually allocated to different customers, they are being shared on a same physical server, they are totally isolated from each other. So this point will be elaborated when I'll be discussing EC2 service. So, the IT infrastructure that AWS provides to its customers is designed and managed in alignment with the best security services and a variety of IT security standards. As we can see on this slide, let me. As we can see on the slide, that AWS offers various compliance certifications. One of the most important one is PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Basically, these are the compliance certifications which are mandated by various industries. Like PCI DSS is mandated by credit card companies, to help ensure the security of credit card transactions in the payment industry. So basically, these compliance certifications refer to the technical and operational standards that these kinds of businesses follow to secure and protect the data which they are storing. So, in case of credit card companies, this standard is known as PCI DSS. So, wherever they are going to store the data, these credit card companies are going to store the data. They want that third party should be complying this kind of standard. One another compliance certification is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. In short, it is called as HIPAA. So this is the standard for protecting the sensitive patient data. So basically, this is offered by, or this needs to be complied in US by US companies, because it should be according to the US Department of Health and Human Services. So they have established this standard for all healthcare organizations who are dealing with sensitive patient data. So they have to comply with this kind of data, this kind of standard. So they, while storing their data in third party infrastructure, on third party infrastructure, they have to see whether that organization is also complying with this kind of standard. So AWS complies with many of these security standards and compliance certifications, so that many industries can store their applications and data on AWS. So now we come to AWS free tier categories, because AWS offers uh, uh, many free tier categories so that AWS customers can become familiar with various services of AWS without paying any cost. So once they become familiar with these services, then they can hire the infrastructure or resources on payment basis. So under this a free tier category, we are having three services, three types of free tier categories. Like one is always free, another is 12 months free, and third one is short term free trial. So always free tier category, actually it do not expire. That means the services which are offered under this category, always free tier category, they never expire. You can always access these services free of cost, but within some specified limits, right? And these will be available to all AWS customers. What we mean by AWS customers, the customers or the persons who have created an account on AWS, right? I'll be discussing how we can create an account on AWS. So these types of services you can access anytime, but within specified limits. Another category is 12 months free category. So under this category, you can access the AWS services for 1 year. Uh, from starting from the sign up date, right? So let's say you have signed up today, you have created an account today on AWS, so you'll be able to access these kinds of services for 1 year. After 1 year, you have to pay for accessing these services as per their standard rates. Then some of the AWS services are offered under short-term free trial category. So this is like you can access the services of AWS which are falling under this category for some small amount of time, like for 2-3 months. This will be mentioned against the service. So here also I have provided the link by clicking on which you can go into the details of these categories. So these are the examples of services which falls under these various free tier offers. So you can see that Amazon S3, which is providing you a data storage infrastructure, it comes under 12 months free offer. And Amazon DynamoDB, this comes under always free tier category. Amazon Guard Duty, this is available under 30 days free trial. Basically, it is available under short-term free trial offer. Then Amazon EC2, which we are going to discuss today in this session only, this is available under 12 months free trial category. So you can see that it is saying that you can uh, avail computing capacity in AWS for 750 hours per month on this particular virtual server. So if you exceed this capacity, if you exceed these many number of hours, then you have to pay as per the standard rate. So they have put a limit on the usage of these services. But this kind of limit will be there in all the free tier categories. Otherwise, the customers will be using these services for unlimited time. So that's why they have put a limit on the usage of the services in the free tier category. AWS IoT is another service which is available under 12 months free tier. So these are the limitations of 12 months free usage tier category, which you must keep in your mind while using these services. Otherwise, you'll be ending up in paying hefty bills. So we know that after first signing up, these kinds of services will be freely available for 12 months. After 12 months, you will have to pay for accessing these services. Next point is that leftover free monthly usage limit does not roll over to next month. If you have not used your 750 hours in the current month, so the remaining ones will not be available to you in the next month. Exceeding the free limit leads to charges as per standard rates. And you need to pay standard rates when 12-month free usage term expires. Now we'll see how we can access AWS services. That means how we can create an account on AWS. So you need to first open aws.amazon.com, which is the official website for accessing AWS services. Then you need to click on sign up or create a new account on AWS. Then it will ask you your email address with which you want to register or create an account on AWS. And then it will be asking you account name and alias name for your AWS account. So you can give any name over here. Then click on verify email address. So it will be verifying your email address. It will send you an email on this email address which you have stated here. You'll get an email and you need to maybe click on some link to verify your email address. Then after this verifying your email address, you'll be able to see this page where you'll be asked the password for your AWS account. So you need to specify the password for your account and confirm the password. And then this will be the next page where your contact information will be asked. First of all, you'll be asked that with which plan you want to continue using AWS services, whether you want to go ahead with business plan or you want to proceed with personal plan. So here you need to select the personal option, right? Then you need to enter your full name, phone number, country, address, city. That means all the personal details they'll be asking. And here also it has been specified that free tier category offers three types of services, right? Then you have to click on I have read and agree to the terms of AWS and you need to continue. In the next step, it will be asking you credit card or debit card information. So basically, this is without giving your credit or debit card details, it will not allow you to create an account on AWS. So it will currently be using your this credit or debit card number to basically identify you, and it will be executing a minimal amount transaction against this card to just verify your identity, right? So minimal transaction is just rupees 2 which will be debited from your account once you provide your debit card or credit card details, and they'll be credited back within 1 or 2 days. This is just to verify your identity. Later on, if you exceed the usage of the AWS services, then there are chances that the money will be deducted from this account, this credit card or debit card. So be careful not to exceed the usage of AWS. Once you create an instance or once you create a storage machine on AWS, just delete that resource after you use it, right? Otherwise, billing will be there, right? Then after providing these details, Amazon will call you back on the provided phone number, or you'll receive a message. This is again to verify the provided contact number. Then you'll be asked to choose a support plan. That means whether you want to go ahead with the free tire category or you want to go ahead with the paid plan, right? So you need to select the free tire over here, right? The final step is confirmation. Once you confirm, then you need to click on the link to log in again, and it will redirect to the AWS management console, right? Now your account has been created and you can use the AWS services. So let me show you this thing on the AWS portal. So let me first show you how we can open this portal, aws.amazon.com, right? So as I'm already having an account, so it is asking me sign into the console. Otherwise, it will ask you to create an account on AWS. You can click on that link, and then all the pages which I have just shown you, they will be displayed one by one, right? So in that way, you'll be able to create an account on AWS. Once an account is created, you'll be able to see the management console. Let me show you. I'm signing into the portal, right? The next thing is, okay. So next thing is how you can see the various services offered by AWS. So just click on this part, services. So it will show you all the services offered by AWS. Here you'll be able to see the recently visited services. Here you'll be able to see the recently visited services. This is these services are shown here so that you can quickly click on the services which you need to use frequently. Then this is when you click on this all services, you'll be able to see all the services which are also being displayed here. Basically, this AWS is showing you the category of AWS services. Category means it is the basically the AWS services are grouped into various categories. Like if I talk about EC2, so this is a compute service. So once you click on compute, then you'll be able to see EC2, and under this compute category you'll be able to see all the services which are in this compute category, right? If you are not aware that the service which you are going to use is available in which category, then you can just type over here and it will be displayed and over here, right? Fine. So now we go back to the PPT. Yeah, this kind of management console will be visible to you once you create your account on AWS. Now we'll be discussing about the AWS infrastructure, because before using the services of AWS, you must be aware about the AWS infrastructure. So the whole AWS infrastructure is divided into AWS regions. So what do you mean by an AWS region? An AWS region is a geographical location around the world which is consisting of multiple availability zones, right? Just so it may be India. In India also we are having various uh, regions. So the AWS is first divided into various regions, and regions are further divided into various availability zones. So availability zones are nothing but they are data centers which are housing the infrastructure of related to computation, related to storage, etc. So each availability zone is consisting of one or more distinct data centers. They are connected with each other with high speed links. Even regions are also connected with each other with high speed links. So every region is physically isolated from and independent of every other region to achieve fault tolerance. So why we are they are definitely connected with each other so that we can transfer the data between these regions quickly, but they are totally isolated in terms of power, in terms of internet. Because let's say there is an issue with one internet service provider, and that is not able to provide internet, there is some issue, so this should not affect another region. Customers should be able to access their services from another region. So just to provide fault tolerance, they are isolating the two regions in terms of internet connectivity, in terms of power, and various other infrastructure services. So, data in a specific region is not replicated outside that region by default. So, data is going to be replicated across availability zones by default, but it is not going to be replicated across regions. So, if you want to replicate data across regions, you are responsible to that for that, and you need to pay extra for that, right? And you are responsible for selecting the region to store data as per your compliance and network latency requirements. So as I told you that the AWS infrastructure is spanned across multiple regions. Some of the regions maybe in India, some are in US, some are in Australia, so it is spanned across different countries in the world. So it is up to you that in which region you want to deploy your applications. It may depend on the network latency. Like if you are staying in India, your company is running in India, so definitely you want to deploy your services in the nearby region. That may be in Mumbai, that may be in Hyderabad, right? And to reduce the network latency, right? And it also depends on the compliance requirements. So these regions are connected to multiple internet service providers and different power grids to provide you fault tolerance. And these regions are interconnected using high speed links so that data transfer will not take that much time. Each region comprises of at least three availability zones, and AWS Cloud operates in over 105 availability zones within 33 geographic regions around the world. So, I have provided a link through which you can explore the AWS infrastructure. I'll also be showing you just a minute. So, this is showing you the different regions where AWS infrastructure is available. It is available in North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific. In Asia Pacific, you can see Mumbai is one of the regions. Then the whole details are given over here. As you can see in India, yeah, this Mumbai is a region which is having three availability zones. It was launched in 2016. Then Hyderabad is another region in India. It is having three availability zones. It is launched in 2022, right? Other regions which are there in Asia Pacific are Singapore, Hong Kong, etc. So this is going to give you all the details related to global infrastructure of AWS, right? So once you create an account now, this is the link where you can see the various regions available to you, because all of the regions you cannot access. You can see that these regions are disabled for you. It is written over here that these are not enabled for this account. Like the regions which are there in China, they are not available to every customer. They are basically available to the customers which are staying in China. And if you want to create an account, uh, means you want to deploy your resources in the China region, then you have to create a special account for that purpose, right? Otherwise, this is showing you the regions which are available to you where you can create your resources or deploy your application. So currently I have selected Mumbai as my preferable region. So all my resources are going to be created in the Mumbai region because this will reduce the latency issues. So this is to note here that once you create resources, keep in mind that the region where you have created resources, because once you sign in and you create your resources in Mumbai region, next time when you'll be signing in, and suppose you have selected Oyo region at that time, in your next sign in, so you'll be searching for your resources that they are not available. I had created one instance, I had deployed all my application on that instance, but it is not running, it is not showing that instance. So this is due to the region you have selected. Now you, in the next sign in, maybe you have selected Oyo region, and earlier you deployed your resources in Mumbai region. This is the reason that you will not be able to see your resources. It happens many times. So keep in your mind that you have selected this region for deploying your resources. Then availability zones are also designed for fault isolation. That means each zone will be having separate power resource, networking, and connectivity to reduce the likelihood of two zones failing at the same time. So availability zones in a region are also interconnected using low latency links. So in each zone, participating data centers are connected to each other over redundant low latency links. And these intra and interzone links are heavily used for data replication by a number of AWS services such as storage and managed databases. So that means, let's say you have deployed a storage infrastructure over one availability zone, in a one availability zone, and you want to replicate the data from that storage service to another storage service in another availability zone. So in that case, these high speed links will be used to replicate your data. So that means whole AWS infrastructure, their regions, their availability zones are connected with high speed links. So internally, when the data is being transferred between the AWS data centers, it will be transferred with high speed. They'll not be using internet to transfer the data between the AWS regions or between the AWS availability zones. They'll be using their high speed links for transferring the data in between the AWS infrastructure. They'll be using internet only when they have to transfer the data from the AWS to the customer, which is outside the AWS infrastructure. Then we'll be talking about AWS local zones. AWS local zones place the compute, storage, database, and other selected services closer to the end users, because there are some services which require single digit millisecond latency. So for these kinds of services, they are providing data centers which are near to the customers. So they are placing all these services in those data centers. Like Amazon EC2 is available in local zones, Amazon VPC is also available, Amazon EBS is also available. So these local zones are going to provide you a high bandwidth, secure connection between your local workloads. That means the workloads which are there in your own premises and those running in the AWS region. So right now, local zones in India are there in Delhi and Kolkata, right? So for North Indian customers, they can store their data and some of the applications in these local zones to reduce the latency issues. Finally, these local zones will be connected with these regions, like I'll be showing you in my next slide. Yeah, this one. So AWS, as I told you, AWS operates in two regions in India. They are Mumbai and Hyderabad. Local zones of Mumbai are Delhi and Kolkata, and local zones of Hyderabad are Bangalore and Chennai. So Mumbai will be considered as a parent region in case of Delhi and Kolkata local zones, and Hyderabad is considered as a parent region for Bangalore and Chennai local zones. So if you are having some applications which require millisecond latencies, like some content delivery, like Netflix is there, it wants to display the content with very much latency. So some of the data can be cached in these local zones so that latency is very much low. Then we can say that local zones are an extension of AWS regions. So basically, they facilitate execution of highly demanding applications that require single digit millisecond latencies to your end users, such as to enable real time gaming, live streaming, AR and VR applications. So for these kinds of applications, we can enable local zones. So by default, they are not enabled for any account. You need to enable the local zones for your account, and then only you can create the instances in these local zones. So I'll be discussing this point while demonstrating AWS services. So you can see the steps that first we need to enable the AWS local zones, then extend your Amazon VPC, that is your network virtual private cloud, to AWS local zone, because by default it is not the subnet is not created in local zone. So actually you need to create a subnet in your local zone, you need to extend your VPC, you need to extend your network, then build and run your low latency applications in this AWS local zone. So basically, there are three steps for creating your instances in local zones. Then Outpost. This is a recent service provided by AWS. It is designed for workloads that need to remain on premises, right? This is to be stressed on premises due to latency requirements, where customers want that workload to run seamlessly with the rest of their other workloads in AWS. Suppose there are some applications which cannot leave the uh, premises, your organization premises. Some of your applications you are running in your own organization infrastructure that cannot leave the your premises infrastructure, in-house infrastructure, right? So but you want that you want you want to connect these workloads or applications with the AWS applications. Some of the applications are there in-house, and some of the applications are running in AWS infrastructure. So, if you want it to be seamlessly connected, one option is that you can request AWS that they bring their AWS infrastructure in your own premises, right? And they can deploy your applications which were earlier running on your premises infrastructure. They'll shift those applications from on-premises infrastructure to AWS infrastructure, which will be housed in your own organization. So that comes under AWS Outposts, right? So this will be actually compute and storage racks built with AWS designed hardware. So you'll be ordering this infrastructure to AWS, and you'll be selecting your Outpost configuration consisting of a mix of compute and storage capacity. Once you ordered all this infrastructure, the AWS personnel will come and deliver the Outpost to your site, and they'll connect this Outpost infrastructure to the power. They'll set up network connectivity to AWS region and your local networks. That means the Outpost infrastructure which they have placed in your own premises, they'll be connected with the AWS region. Network connectivity is maintained between the your this Outpost infrastructure and the AWS region, as well as this will be connected to your local network so that you can easily transfer the data in this network. Then they'll be using standard AWS APIs or management console to launch EC2 instances in this Outpost infrastructure, and then you can start using these services. uh, how to select an AWS region? I told you that you can select a location where you can deploy your workload. So what are the best practices for choosing these AWS region? First is compliance. So, if your workload contains the data that is bound by local regulations, then selecting the region that complies with the regulation overrides any other evaluation factors. That means compliance is the most important point while choosing any AWS region. So, this applies to workloads that are bound by data residency laws, where choosing an AWS region located in that country is mandatory. For example, you are currently staying in China and you want, as per the country's laws, let's say you cannot run your applications or you cannot store your data belonging to your organization outside the China. Then this is a compliance for you that you need to store your data in a region located in China, right? So this is one example for this point, right? So you need to comply with the data residency laws. Then the services, because all the services are not available in all the regions. I have given a link over here, so you can see that the services which are available as per the regions. Like if you are selecting Mumbai region, so you need to see the service which you want to use, whether it is available in that region or not. If it is not available, then you can shift to Hyderabad region. Maybe it is available in that region, right? So you can go into the details of services as per regions by clicking on this link. Then comes the cost. So certain regions will cost more than others. So you can use built-in AWS calculators to do rough estimates to inform your choices, because it depends on the like currency of that particular country. There are so many reasons because of which cost may vary across different regions. So they have provided built-in AWS calculators using which it will give you a rough cost estimate, that if you are going to select the resources or services in the particular region, then how much it will cost to you. Accordingly, you can select the region for your services. Proximity, definitely you will be choosing a region which is closest to your location and close to your customer's location to optimize the network latency. Then the major AWS services are IAM, identity and access management, compute services, storage services, and networking services. So these are the major services which you should know to deploy your resources in AWS, right? So we'll be going into the details of Amazon EC2, which is a web service that offers scalable computing capacity servers in the AWS data centers. The benefits of using AC2 are it will eliminate the upfront payment for the hardware. That means you need not buy the hardware in advance. Let's say you are going to start a new company, startup company you are opening. In that case, definitely, if you're not hiring the infrastructure from cloud, you need to buy the hardware infrastructure for your organization. You need to hire a space where you are going to locate the infrastructure. So all this will be going to cost a lot. So what you can do, what can be the alternative, you can actually hire the infrastructure from the AWS. It is going to reduce your capital as well as operational expenditure. Then it also facilitates faster development and deployment of software, and it introduces thousands of server instances in minutes. You can increase the number of resources, you can decrease the number of servers as per your requirement, application requirement. It also facilitates the storage and configures networking and security for you. You can scale the capacity and you can track the requirement changes. Auto scaling is one of the service of AWS using which you can track the requirement changes. Let's say CPU workload is increasing on the instances, it is going beyond 75%, then automatically new instances will be added, right? So this auto scaling service is actually tracking the workload on your existing instances as per settings you have made, like as per your configuration. If you have set a configuration that as soon as the workload goes beyond 75%, or if you have made a setting that workload goes beyond 85%, only then the new instance will be added. So it will be added as per your instructions. So it will also ensure easy and scalable cloud computing. So let's see the basic um, structure of an EC2 instance, like what will be it looking like. So in case of EC2 services, we are going to create EC2 instances. EC2 is Elastic Compute Cloud, and instance means that you are going to create a virtual server. Normally, we buy a server in our organization to deal with the computation services, to handle the computation services of our organization. So in this case, in case of AWS EC2, it is called as instance, which means it is going to provide you a virtual server. Why we are saying it is going to provide you a virtual server and not a full physical server? Because full physical server is virtualized by AWS, and then it is going to create a number of virtual servers on the physical server just to enhance its utilization. And these virtual servers or instances are distributed among various customers as per their requests. So it is going to optimize the utilization of the physical server, as well as it is going to reduce the cost of hiring these instances. So we can say see that here the instance, this one is your instance, this one is your EC2 instance, and you can see that it is placed in an availability zone, right? It is placed in an availability zone, and it is associated with the security group. Security group is nothing but a set of firewall rules which are associated with this instance, so that it can control the traffic which is coming to this instance, right? Then an EBS volume. Amazon EBS is Elastic Block Storage, that is network attached storage. This is also attached with this instance, and this is actually boot volume. That means it helps the system to boot up. So once you create an EC2 instance, it will be having mandatorily having one Amazon EBS, that is root volume, which will facilitate the booting of this instance, and it will also be associated with one security group, or maybe more than one security group. So this security group is nothing but a set of firewall rules which will control the traffic coming to your instance and going from your instance. And it will also be associated with a key pair. So key pair is actually consisting of one private key and one public key. So public key will remain with the AWS, and private key will be kept, this need to be kept secretly with yourself, right? So once you have created your instance, and then when you want to log in to your instance, you need to provide this private key to connect with your instance. So getting connected with your instance, you need to provide a private key, and that is actually paired with the public key which is there with the AWS, which is actually stored in the instance, right? So when this pair will occur, they will match, only then you will be able to connect with your instance. We'll come to stopping an instance later on. First we'll see how we can create an instance, right? So this is showing you EC2 dashboard. I told you that if you want to go to the EC2 service, you can just type it here, EC2, or you can click on services, then you can go to compute. It will show you EC2, right? So I have selected Mumbai region. That means all my resources are going to be created in Mumbai region. This is showing you EC2 dashboard. Uh, Let me first close this windows. Okay. Before starting with this instances creation, let me first apprise to you that how can this learning help to you or your students. Because once you acquire some certification in AWS, then you can make your career in this domain. So for that purpose, you can search AWS certification on Google, and this page will open. So you can click on this link, browse AWS certification path. It will take you to this page where you can see that how you can go ahead with various certifications provided by AWS. You need to study the content for a particular certification, and you have to give an exam. Like, you can schedule your exam from here. First of all, you need to select the AWS certification with which you want to proceed. It is showing you various kinds of certifications. First one is the basic certification, is AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. Then the advanced ones are certified solution architect, associate, and so many certifications are there. It is depending on the knowledge you are having with respect to AWS infrastructure. So it is detailed in this document. You can see, if you are from a non IT background, let me zoom it. uh, if you are from a non IT background and switching to a cloud, then you can start with AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Certificate, which validates the foundational knowledge of AWS Cloud and terminology. So you'll be able to position yourself as for an entry level cloud job and to earn additional AWS certification. That means if you want to enter uh, into this profession, first of all, you need to certify yourself with this AWS certified cloud practitioner, right? Then you can go ahead with other certifications as per your interest. Like, if you're in sales and marketing, then also cloud practitioner certificate you need to hire. And if you are having 1 to 3 years of IT or STEM background, then you can go ahead with associate level AWS certifications that aligns with your role or interest, because there are so many, you can see, certifications related to associate level, professional level, and specialty. Like, you are having expertise in machine learning, then you can go ahead with AWS certified machine learning specialty, and you can have your career in this area, right? So I'll be sharing this document with you in the folder of instruction material, which I have already shared with you, right? Then yeah, if you want to go in the details of any topic, you want to learn any AWS service and you want to go into the details of that service, then you need to click on AWS documentation. So this one, if you click, you'll be able to see the documentation of for every service. So you can see that they have listed the most popular services here. So you can directly click on Amazon EC2 and you can go into the details of using this services. Like, this is the user guide for creating Linux instances, this is user guide for Windows instances, and so on. But if you want to look into the documentation of other services, you can click over here, view all documentation, right? So it will display all the services of AWS. You can click over here to see the details of any service. Like Amazon EC2, if you want to go into the details of Amazon EC2, you can click here. Then Amazon DynamoDB, AWS AI and ML decision guide. So you can click on any service to learn about that, the usage of that service. Okay. Then we come to creation of instances in EC2. One latest feature which is added by AWS is they have added a generative AI assistant also that is called as Amazon Q. It is not coming right now, but previously when I was using this AWS, it was coming here, and it is actually to provide you guidance, troubleshooting tips, and learning about AWS services and capabilities, right? This is called as Amazon Q. This is generative AI assistant provided by Amazon. Now click on launch instance to create a virtual server in AWS EC2. Click on launch instance. One minute, just let me go back. I want to show you something. When you click on launch instance, there are three options available to you. Launch instance from template means, let's say earlier you launched an instance, and now also you want to create instances of the same type. So what you can do is, when you earlier created your instances, you can save them in the form of template, right? Then now when you will be creating your instances, you can click on launch instance from template, and that template will be available to you, and you can create similar instances again. Migrate a server, let's say you want to migrate a server from one region to another, or from one location, from one availability zone to another, so you can use this kind of service. But right now we'll be just creating an instance, so we'll be clicking on launch instances. Now the first thing is, you need to give a name to your instance, my first instance. You can also add tags to your instance. Tags, basically, like if you want to say that this instance belongs to production department, or this instance belongs to this group, this team, then you can specify the key. Like if you want that, sorry, yeah, if you want that this needs to belong to production department, so that later on you can identify that which instances are related to production department, so you can identify it later on. So you can specify the key as department and value as production, right? Similarly, you can add more tags if you want. So maximum 50 tags can be associated with an instance, right? So maximum 50 tags can be associated with an instance. Right now I'm not assigning a tag to my instance. Then comes the AMI. AMI is Amazon Machine Image, right? Amazon Machine Image. It is a template that contains the software configuration for the instance. So, software configuration includes operating system, application server, and applications which are required to launch your instance. So, normally, when you buy a server, you do its software configuration by yourself. But now nothing is to be done. You just have to select the software configuration for your instance out of the available ones. So they are being displayed here. uh, as you can see, limited number of AMIs over here. If you want to see all the AMIs, you can click on browse more AMIs, so the whole list will be available here. You can click any of the AMIs as per your requirement. But right now we are going to select the AMIs which are available under free tier category. Otherwise, we need to pay for the server if that is not under the free tier category. So what we can do is, we can click on free tier only. Then it will be displaying only the servers, AMIs, which are available under free tier category, right? So I'll be going ahead with Amazon Linux 2023 AMI, right? Free tier eligible, verified provider. Then instance type. Instance type means that we are going to select the hardware configuration for our instance, for our virtual server. Again, there are many instance types available. Let me click on compare instance types, right? So it will display the list of entire instances which are available in AWS. You can see here, it provides you a wide selection of instance types which are optimized to fit different use cases. Instances are nothing but the virtual servers that can run your applications, and these all instances vary in terms of CPU, memory, storage, and network capacity, right? So basically it gives you the flexibility to choose the appropriate mix of resources for your applications, right? So you can see that there are various instances which are varying in terms of CPU, architecture, memory, Storage also, storage in terms of like storage in terms of GB, then storage type, network performance. So many parameters are there in terms of which these instances are varying, right? You can see long list is there, right? So basically, let me show you. If you click on this now, there are different parameters. Like you can see all the parameters are still not visible to you. If you want to add more parameters, more features related to these instances, let's say I want to add the course available with each instance, I'll just select the course and confirm. So you can see the number of cores available with each of the instance is also coming, it's also being displayed here, right? And if I also want to display the threads, um, let me, yeah, threads per core. Yes. So it is also being displayed. So vCPU is nothing but it is total number of threads available in the instance. So this we can compute by multiplying the cores with the threads per core. You can see it is 4. So there are 4 cores, 1 thread per core. So total number of vCPUs will be 4 multiplied by 1 is equal to 4. So that's how we can know the vCPUs available with respect to every instance, right? And these are actually known as instance families. Like these are all instance family belonging to T category. So the terminology related to this naming convention, this also I have discussed in my PPT. I'll be just showing you. Yes, this is being displayed here. You can see if an instance type is C7GN.X large, so C is actually denoting the instance family. So C means compute optimized, right? And if it is I means storage optimized, right? So accordingly, you can choose the instance type. Like if you are having applications which require more computation capacity, then you can go ahead with instances starting with C. And if your applications are more towards storage, if they require more storage infrastructure, then you can go ahead with I instances. Then 7 is representing the instance generation. G means this is representing the processor family. G is actually AWS Graviton processors. If it is A, that means AMD processors. I is representing Intel processors. N is if any additional capabilities are there, right? If E is there, that means it is having extra storage or memory. Z is there, so high performance. Then X large is actually denoting the instance size, right? So I provided the link where you can go into the details of these naming conventions, because I have not provided the entire list related to instance families. There is a huge list, so you can explore the same through this link, right? Okay. Let me go back. So currently again we need to select the instance which is available under free tier category. So let me go back. There it is. Yeah, so T2.micro, it is available under free trial eligible category. So I'll be going ahead with this instance type. Then comes the key pair. I told you that you need to provide a key pair. So if you're not having a key pair with you, you can click on create new key pair. So creating new key pair means, again, public key will be kept with AWS and private key will be provided to you. You need to download the same and you need to store it at some secret place. So when you'll be connecting with your instance, or when somebody else is going to connect with this instance, you need to provide the private key to that person. So public key, corresponding public key will be stored in that instance itself. When he'll be trying to connect the instance, he'll be providing the private key, and then the pair, when the pair will be matched, then only the instance can be used. So as I'm already having a private key, I have already created a key pair, so I'm selecting the existing private key, right? Then comes the network settings. So one thing is that you can create a network where your instances can be connected. So let's say you want to make some instances publicly available and some of the instances you don't want to make publicly available. They need to be available within the network, but they need to be available privately. So they you can assign private IP address to those machines which need not be publicly available, and others can be assigned public IP address. And in this way you can actually customize a VPC for you by clicking on this edit option, and you can customize subnet for your this instances. But this I'll not be elaborating now, because there is another session for Amazon VPC where this will be explained. This requires some networking knowledge, so it will take some time. So that will be elaborated in Amazon VPC session, right? Uh, so we will now go ahead with the default VPC. So Amazon actually creates a default VPC for you, and subnet. If you say I have no preference, I want to go ahead with default subnet, so that is already created for you. Otherwise, you can also create a, choose a subnet. This will give you the info, the subnet in which the network interface is located, right? So we'll go ahead with default subnet right now. Then comes the security group. So security group is a set of firewall rules that control the traffic for your instance. So add rules to allow specific traffic to reach your instance. So if you are having existing security group, you can click on this one. If you want to create a new security group, you can click on the create security group. So my security group, I am creating a new security group which will be called as Launch Wizard 5. So what I want to allow, because it is a Linux machine, so you need to allow the SSH traffic which is already selected, because it knows that it is a Linux machine, and it can be accessed only through SSH, so it has already enabled SSH port. Then if you want to create it as a web server, then you need to allow HTTP and HTTPS traffic also. Now what you want that only my IP address through which I have created this instance, current IP address through which only through this IP address I may be able to connect to this instance. Then in that case you can select my IP, or you can customize the IP addresses which can connect to your instance, right? Let's say you want that the IP addresses which belong to your organization should be able to connect to your instance, then you can specify those, that CIDR block. Otherwise, currently we can go with anywhere, but this is not a secure option, right? Then I told you that one EBS volume, root volume, will be connected with your instance just to facilitate booting of your instance, right? So by default, for Linux instances, 8 gigabyte volume is attached with your Linux instance, and in case of Windows instances, as it requires more storage for booting, so 30 gigabyte instance root volume will be attached to your instance, right? You can add more volumes also by clicking on this, but read this note carefully. Free tier eligible customers can get up to 30 gigabyte of EBS general purpose or magnetic storage. If you exceed the storage, then you need to pay, right? So I'll not be adding a new volume. Now you can see the summary of all the points. Like I am creating one instance, you can increase the number of instances, right? Currently I'm creating one instance. This is the chosen AMI, and this is the instance type which I have selected, then security group, storage volume, etc., right? uh, Let me go to some of the advanced details also. um, the major ones are shutdown behavior, uh, which says stop or terminate. So that means when you shut down your machine, it should be only stopped or it should be terminated, right? I'll clear these 2 points. What is the difference between stopping a machine and terminating an instance? Terminating an instance means all the storage, anything related to your instance will be terminated. The whole instance will be freed, released to AWS. Then termination protection means uh, Normally what you can do is you can go to the dashboard, select the machine, and you can terminate the instance. But if you want to provide the machine or instance, let's say it is having some sensitive information, so you don't want it to be terminated, or by default you may, by mistake you may think that somebody may select and terminate it. So what you can do is you can enable the terminate protection, so that nobody can terminate the machine from the EC2 dashboard, right? So once you disable it from here, or some other option, then only you'll be somebody will be able to terminate this instance, right? Similarly, stop protection is there, enable and disable, right? And another thing is stop hibernate behavior, that when you are going to stop the instance, it should be stopped or it should be hibernated, right? So three things are there. One is termination, where all the resources will be released uh, related to that particular instance, may it be storage, networking, anything, security group, right? So, if you are going to stop the machine, or if you are going to hibernate the machine, what are the differences with respect to termination? So, let's see that. Let's Let me go back to PPT. So, this is showing you the stopping an instance. Once you stop an instance, so what happens? So, you can see that EC2. This is your instance. So once you create an instance, it is attached to an Amazon EBC root volume. Sometimes you also attach Amazon EC2 instance storage. So what's the difference between two? EBS is actually not directly onto the instance, not directly, you are having a disk which is attached to your system, and one is a disk which is portable or which is network attached to your system. So EC2 instance storage is the disk which is directly attached to your system, right? And Amazon EBS, elastic block storage, is which is attached through some kind of networking, right? So this instance is also having private IP address, public IPv4 address, IPv6 address. It is also having RAM. It is also having elastic IP address. So once you stop the instance, so you can see that instance storage is removed, right? Instance storage is removed. It is released, and RAM contents are also deleted. EBS will remain associated with EC2 instance. Private IPv4 address will also be there. Elastic IP address will be there, and IPv6 address will be there. But public IPv4 address will be released, right? So these are the things which happen when an instance is stopped, right? Then comes the hibernating an instance. So hibernation actually saves the contents from the instance memory to your Amazon EBS. So in that case, the contents of the RAM, you can see if you are hibernating a machine, first of all, it will be stopped and then it will be hibernated. Hibernated means all the RAM contents will be put to Amazon EBS, right? And when you again allow the instance to run from the hibernated machine, then the RAM contents will be restored. That means Amazon EC2 persists the instance EBS root volume and any attached EBS data volume, right? And RAM contents are also preserved in case of hibernating an instance. So this is how hibernating behavior and stop behavior is different, right? So till this point, if you are having any queries, you may ask. Anybody having any query till this point may ask. So basically, one difference between instance storage and EBS storage is that instance storage is um kind of temporary storage, because it is going to be deleted if you terminate your instance, or if you stop your instance. So if you want that data on an instance persist, um, later on also, then it should be stored on EBS volume, right? Because it will remain there even if the server is stopped. Even if it is terminated, you can allow the EBS volume to be there. You can allow that EBS volume should remain there. The content should not be deleted. So for that purpose, you can click on the and you can enable an option. There is an option, delete on termination. So if you click on this option, that then EBS will be deleted. If you don't click on that option, then EBS will be there. If you uncheck this option, then data on EBS volume will remain there even if the server is terminated. So if you want to retain data for a long time, put it on EBS volume. If you want to uh, get it deleted with the termination of the instance, then you can store it on instance storage. So when your instance is started, means from hibernation to running state, if you bring, then EBS root volume is restored to its previous state, the RAM contents are reloaded, the processes that were previously running on the instance are resumed, and previously attached data volumes, that means EBS volumes, are reattached, and the instance retain its instance ID also. So let's go back to this one. Right, so we have seen the summarization also. We are ready to launch our instance. You can see I have one root volume. I have allowed HTTPS, HTTP, and SSH traffic also, and auto assign public IP enabled because I want it to be publicly available. Right. So everything is perfect. I can launch my instance. So successfully initiated launch of instance. Now I have created my instance. How can I use this instance? By connecting to this instance. Let me go back to all the instances. So this is my, let me see my instance. Yeah. So my first instance, it is in running stage, right? I need to connect to this instance. So I've selected this instance, then click on connect. So this is the public IP of my system. This is the default username of my instance. It is by default for all Linux instances of this type. Now I'll connect using EC2 instance connect because it is having public IP v4 address. If you want to connect with an instance which is having private IPv4 address, then you can use this option, right? So this is instance ID. This is public IP address, which I can copy for later use. Connect. So we have connected with the instance. So anybody having any query till this point, please you may ask.
If we change the availability zone, will the price will get changed?
Just a minute, I need to increase the volume. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, if we change the availability zone, the price will also get changed?
Yes, sir. That you need to check on Amazon services. Sometimes it may remain same, but you need to check out whether it is varying or not.
Ma'am, this free tier will
No, no. In this case, it will not affect.
okay, ma'am, not for a free tier. I'm just asking that this graphical user interface is not available with this Ubuntu, right, ma'am? This operating system, sorry.
For this particular instance, this is the only available option,
Okay, okay.
right? Otherwise, you can go with Windows machine also. I selected Linux machine na, while choosing an AMI. You can also select a Windows machine. It is one of the Windows machine is also available under free tier category,
Okay, thank you.
right? So we have connected with this instance. I have shared an instruction sheet on the link I have shared with you. Have you all downloaded that instruction sheet? Because that is consisting of all the instructions through which we can create a website on this Linux machine. Basically, I'm going to make it our Linux web server, and I'll be just creating a sample web page on this Linux web server. So all of you can do hands-on side by side. So first thing is I'll be using sudo -s command. This is to gain the root access, right? So you can see I've gained the root access. Okay, then please mute yourself. Somebody's mic is not muted. Yes, yum update -y. Just a minute. To update all the latest packages. Please mute yourself. Somebody's mic is open.
Excuse me, Mala ma'am.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, from where can I get that instruction? Because in the chat it is not provided, I believe.
Have you not downloaded? Have you not downloaded the instruction sheet
Okay,
from
okay.
the
Yes,
shared
yes,
link?
ma'am. Yes, yes, I have downloaded.
So it is having
Okay,
a
and
document. Let me show if I can show you
no,
here.
ma'am, I have.
Have? Okay.
I thought it is something different.
No, it is the same. There is a document with name na, create a website on Linux web server. There's a document named this
Yes,
one,
yes, ma'am.
right?
Got it. Thank you.
So just follow the instructions given on that instruction sheet. Same instruction I'm doing here, right? So then yum update -y. This is to update the list of available packages. Then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the Apache web server, and I'm going to install PHP on this web server. Then I would be creating a small PHP website or just a hello page in PHP, right? To demonstrate you that how we can create a web server on Apache web server on Linux instance, and how we can create a PHP website on that web server, right? So this is my motive. So I'll be going ahead with one by one instructions. If you will not be able to install PHP properly, na, because it happens with participants, just one minute. Some participants are asking about this instruction sheet. This is for all of you that I have shared a link with all of you, Google Drive link. So through that link, you can access this instructions sheet, right? Okay. So let me proceed. Or if you are not having access to that instruction sheet right now, what you can do is you can just follow me, right? I'll be going slowly. Okay. Then I'll be installing Apache web server. The command is yum. I'll be just zooming. I think it's fine. It is visible now to everyone, right? Don't worry, all the participants. I'll be sharing the PPT with you. I'll be sharing again the instruction sheet with you. So don't worry about that. You just pay attention to what I'm delivering, right? So yum install httpd-y. So it will install the Apache web server. Just let me know if you are getting an issue. Okay. Then I'll be starting the service http d start. Fine. Yeah. Then next step is that I'll be installing PHP. Sudo yum install PHP peer hyphen y. Okay. So PHP is installed. Now I need to test to make sure whether it is working correctly or not. So what I can do is I can create a test PHP file, and we'll be accessing it through web browser, right? So I'll be creating a test file sudo with nano editor, and we need to create in this folder in case of Linux where www html test.php, right? So an editor will be opened. Here I'll write PHP. Just a test page of PHP will be displayed if it is working fine, right? PHP info brackets, right? Then semicolon. Okay. Then I'll be saving this file by pressing Control X. It will be asking yes or no, you want to save or not. I'll be pressing Y and then enter, right? So this is a test PHP file which I have created. Now I'll be opening it through a web browser. Just I am going to access this PHP file through this Linux web browser. So what I need to do is I need to provide the IP address, public IP address. Just a minute. And I need to write test.php. So you can see that I am getting the same text as I wrote in that PHP file. It is actually not compiling that text, right? So that means PHP has not been installed properly, but it is being able to access that Linux web server, because then only it was able to read that file. When I typed this public IP address of that web server, it was able to that means access the web server, but it is not interpreting the PHP file. That means PHP is not has not been installed properly. There is some maybe issue in connectivity of PHP with Apache, right? So we need to make some modifications, right? So we need to actually configure the Apache to use PHP, because by default Apache does not know how to handle the PHP files. So we need to open a configuration file of this Apache by using this command sudo. It's not being typed. Sudo nano etc httpd configuration, then http d.conf. So this is the Apache configuration file. I need to make some additions in this file so that it is so that PHP can be configured as per this Apache, right? So I need to type so let me add over here. Yeah, here I would be adding add type add type text HTML dot PHP.
Hello, madam. Excuse
Yes,
me, madam.
yes, please.
How to access AWS account, madam? This is the free, madam.
Yes, I have just told in the beginning of my session that you can create a free tier account on AWS.
Sign up, madam.
Yes,
Credit card will be there.
fine. Yes. That is actually to verify your identity. It will not, it will just deduct rupees 2 and then that will be credited back within 1-2 days, right? So it is not going to charge you unless you exceed the limit of the usage limit of the service.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Okay. So I'll be sharing this video with all of you so that you can later on or in the meantime between 1 to 2:30 you can create a free account on AWS, right? Then add type application x hyphen http d hyphen php then dot php. So this is mentioned in that instruction sheet, right? So let us save using Control X, then enter. Now I'll start the Apache web server. Sudo service httpd restart, right? Then let's check whether that is working or not. So it's working. That means we have configured Apache web server for PHP. Now you can see that it's working. We are able to access the Linux web server as well as it is displaying that test.php file, right? So any of the participant who is able to do this, or if you are not able to do with your web server now, what you can do is you can use my web server and see that this test.php is being displayed. This address is for let me paste it. You can test at your own end it's working or not, because it is a Linux web server which is publicly available. So all of you can see that whether this test page, my PHP website, is being displayed or not. Working fine? Oh yeah, that's good. So how many out of you is actually saying that it's working with their server, or they were using my server? Okay. So you'll be creating yours later on. Please try to create, right? Okay, okay. Let me go back. So similarly, you can create a PHP website, because I've just demonstrated you a small PHP file. You can create HTML page, you can create PHP whole PHP website now on this Linux web server, right? But don't forget to delete this Linux instance after using, because you know that if you exceed the specified limit, that is 750 hours per month, so the charges will be incurred. Okay. uh, so let me see what is left. Yeah, now only the yeah, so IAM will be discussing in the next session. So for now I am just going to demonstrate how you can enable the local zone. Okay, so for that purpose, again we need to go to EC2 dashboard, right? EC2 dashboard. Then we need to go to enable additional zones. Okay, so here let me smooth. Okay, you can see that within Mumbai we are having three availability zones, right? And we are having, and these three availability zones are enabled by default. That means you can use any availability zones out of these zones, right? And you can see that two local zones are there. That means Mumbai is the parent region for these two local zones. So any data, if you make Delhi as your local zone, if you enable Delhi local zone, so that will be ultimately um transferring data to and from the parent zone Mumbai, right? So you can see that these local zones are disabled by default, right? These local zones are disabled by default. So first thing you need to do is you need to click on this one, and you need to go to manage zone group, and you need to enable this zone, right? Currently I'm not going to enable this zone because this may incur charges. So I'm just apprising you of how you can enable a local zone. So this way you can enable the local zones. And as we saw that there are two more steps after this if you want to deploy instances in this zone. So another is you need to click on VPC. Because why we need to click on VPC? Because currently the VPC in which you are deploying your instances, VPC is nothing but a network where you are deploying your instances in Amazon. It is deploying your instances in one of the availability zones, and these availability zones have their respective subnets, right? They are having their respective subnets. So just click on your VPC, this one. um yes, so this is displaying you that we are having three subnets in this particular VPC, and these subnets are having one routing table, right? Connections to other networks, this is gateway, right? So this can be viewed by clicking on your VPC and then on resource map, right? So these three subnets are belonging to three different availability zones. So that means there is no subnet related to the local zone. So that means you need to create a subnet for the enabled local zone. Suppose you have enabled the Delhi local zone, right? So that means you create a subnet here. Only then you will be able to deploy the instances in that particular subnet. For that purpose, you need to click on create subnet. You need to select the same VPC. Then you need to mention a subnet name and availability zone. So availability zones, you can see that three availability zones are there, out of which you can select any one of them. But if you want to put this subnet, you want to create this subnet in a local zone, then once you enable the local zone in the previous step I just told you, after that it will be displayed here, and then you need to select that particular local zone and just create subnet. Then you'll be able to create a subnet in that particular local zone, and then you will be able to deploy the instances, create the instances in that local zone. So this is how you can enable the local zones. You can create your instances. First of all, create the subnet in that local zone, and then create instances in that subnet, right? So this is all about creating instances in EC2, and how you can create local zones, and what we mean by stopping an instance, hibernating an instance, infrastructure related to EC2. I told you the difference between EBS and instance storage also, and this will be detailed in means EBS storage, instance storage, and various other kinds of storage facilities available in AWS. They will be detailed in the session named AWS storage technologies, right? So if you are having any query till this point, you may ask. Otherwise, I'm going to wind up the session now, and we'll be meeting again at 2:30 p.m.